What is going on, degenerates? Welcome back to the Die Hard MMA podcast. It is Monday evening right here on Pub Sports Radio. You know where we're sitting and what we're doing. We're talking fights. UFC Vegas 53 coming up, and another dumpster diving opportunity for us here. Another one of these low-level cards with some sketchy-ass spots that hopefully we can make some money on, and I could use it. I could use it at the moment. I am not making any money. There are no bitches. I'm not getting any of the bitches. It's been a rough run for your boy. And I just, real quick, guys, I got to, let the elephant out of the room here. Big L last week from me. I'm a little frustrated. I'm a little annoyed because I made some really good bets, and they're just not coming through. Like anybody who's played cards, anybody who's played poker, you know when you're not hitting the river, when you can't ever, hit that flush, or when your opponent needs to, full house up to be able to beat you, they do. Like, that's what's happening to me right now in sports betting, it feels like, because I just can't seem to catch a break. Like, I did my PRP, shout out Cody Saftik, my PRP parlay of violence last week, and just nailed it. Like, that was the easiest, sweetest spot on the entire card. Was let's not pick a side. Let's just say somebody's getting finished and then parlay them all together and scoop piles. And then Elder is deep in an arm triangle choke. He's about passed out. He's gurgling, and I've got Herb Dean standing over him like this, looking at. Does he stop the fight? No, Herb doesn't stop the fight. Does he gurgle until he goes unconscious? No, the dude stops squeezing. And I'm like, how did that fight not get stopped? And then we're deep in the third round. Finally, the kid decides, you know what? Instead of trying to choke this kid, because apparently I can't choke him, I'm just going to elbow him. So he's bleeding all over the canvas. And of course, Herb still doesn't stop the fucking fight. Then blows up the whole parlay. It's a legitimate 10-unit swing, because had that top line hit, the second line also hits, and it's a good night. It's fine. We're in the positive. And no, instead it's another chunk. So just very, very frustrated. We're going to get through it. Anybody who's been sports betting for any amount of time knows that you go through highs and you go through lows. I am definitely in a low right now, but at least for the most part, the radar is not just like totally off the charts in left field. We're close. We're close. Little fine-tuning, little tweaking. We'll get there. Speaking of fine-tuning and tweaking, that's not a great intro. He's not a tweaker. I've had to tweak the show because we had a last-minute cancellation. But I'm calling in the big guns. You know the man from the Club and Sub podcast, my dude sparring with reality, Luke. I was going to say my favorite tweaker before I ever even thought about like how I was setting that up. I'm just rolling right off the top. Luke, buddy, how you doing?
Great, man. Yeah, happy to come in, save the day, and chop up this interesting card. Not necessarily the highest level one in the world, not one that has, the craziest amount of name value by any means, but a lot of fun fights, a lot of interesting spots, and it's kind of these lower level-ish type of cards where you can always look to capitalize on. So looking forward to chopping it up, bro.
Hell yeah, man. Thank you so much for swooping in, ripping the shirt open, revealing that S on the chest, and being here to save the show for us. We got just one of the OG awesome guests everybody always love when you come on and talk fights with me, man. So I appreciate it. This week should be super fun, man. I'm pumped up. I'm excited. I am ready. We got 70 live viewers at this point. Everybody do me a favor, smash that like button. You know the drill. We're on Pub Sports Radio, and we run on your love. If not for your affection and support, we can't pull this thing off week to week. The lines on this show, of course, are presented by none other than Superbook Sports. Everybody make sure you check out Superbook Sports. They're brand new here to AZ. I'm going to be doing some cool stuff with them in the near future. Hey, UFC 274 right around the corner, right in my backyard. So I'm probably going to be doing my first event with Superbook Sports coming up here in the next week or so. So lots of exciting things right around the corner. Man, all right. Now we got all the the officials out of the way, Luke. Why don't we talk about some fights?
Let's do it, bro.
First fight of the night. I highly doubt this is actually the first fight of the night. I mean, I don't believe this is the first fight of the night, but we always go based off of Sherdog, and we've got Alexandr Romanov taking on Chase Sherman. I'll be honest with you, Luke. I had a little bit of fun with this one over the weekend. I was like, man, Chase Sherman saw those before and after pictures of Romanov and was like, oh, my neck hurts. I'm sick. I can't come. I can't make the fight. Like, this is a spot that, I mean, we all know exactly what's going on here. Chase Sherman's been cut by the UFC not once, but twice. He gets a short notice opportunity. They're throwing him in there against Romanov because his opponent fell out. They doubled his show money because they just need to get his ass in the cage so they can get Romanov a win. Chase Sherman, man, I mean, he's got fast hands. He likes those leg kicks. And those are exactly the two things that normally I would look to fade Romanov at like a gigantic plus number. But Chase ain't the guy. He's only got 4 minutes of gas. So while he's hard to take down in round one, he cannot keep his output up over the course of a 15-minute fight. So even if he gets out of that first round, I have no faith that he can survive a takedown at the beginning of the second round, especially considering the kind of shape we saw Romanov come in last week, man. He weighed in at 240. So he's definitely making some changes, coming in much leaner, much better shape, maybe turning that corner, making his career something a bit more of a priority, his diet, his exercise, strength and conditioning program. So, I mean, it's got to be Romanov. I struggle to find any other way to play this thing. And at minus, 1,500, it's hard to play this thing at all. What do you think here, man?
Yeah, right there with you, bro. I mean, it's a pretty easy smash spot for Romanov, in my opinion. Honestly, actually, Chase Sherman's takedown defense historically has been largely pretty decent. I think he stops at about 77% or so. So I think that does need to be, somewhat noted. But I mean, Romanov's an absolute animal. I don't see him having much issue, coming in here and tossing around Chase Sherman. And even that last fight with Sherman against Collier, pretty disconcerting considering Collier isn't exactly, your traditional wrestler grappler archetype. He took the dude down without much ease, passed him, and submitted him. And I think at this point you kind of ran through it off the top. It looks like Sherman's kind of coming in for a paycheck. They gave him a new 4-fight contract. They're just going to feed him to people to essentially do the job to. And I think he's fine with that because they'll say, hey, you're paying me a ton more money. I get even more visibility, in the UFC. It's almost like a weird MMA pro wrestling based angle. Like they're legitimately bringing in the guy to lose to people. And I think that's how they're going to book him going forward. Nonetheless, I think Romanov's like minus 2,500 on certain books. It's like at the end of the day, it still is a heavyweight fight, guys. Like anything can happen. Chase Sherman will throw leg kicks and stuff. He does have some knockouts. Romanov's striking defense isn't very good. So I'm not trying to make the case for Chase Sherman. I'm just saying you're not getting any parlay value out of Romanov or anything like that. Like out of a general rule, you shouldn't be parlaying anybody over minus 1,000 to begin with. Cause what are you getting? 5 cents off your parlay there? You're not getting much. So if anything, you're looking kind of more to a Amanda Nunes type of scenario. Like how does, the person slaughter the lamb? Is it knockout? Is it submission? Are you trying to go with the early rounds? But I think even the under 1.5 is ridiculously juiced at the same time too. So I'd say proceed with caution on how you want to play Romanov. I could see him subbing him. I could see him pounding him out. I think both are pretty viable options. I'd say probably just stay off the fight to begin with.
I tend to agree, man. I mean, my call last week was Romanov sub. I do think that Chase Sherman, he's not so chinny that he's going to go out from 1 or 2 hammer fists. So I kind of see him turtling up and giving up the neck. And we know what Romanov does with that. So I kind of think Romanov's going to end up getting his back and choking him out. But again, that's where kind of like Khamzat Chimaev, you're playing Russian roulette, right? If the ref steps in before he gives up his back, well, he gets the TKO and you lost your bet. So just be careful. KRLB in here with with the right idea. What the fudge? Give me Sherman by DQ. Hey, we saw it last week. We saw it last week. Mike Jackson pulls off the upset by disqualification. It's hard to script this stuff, man. That's why I'm glad you said it. I try to warn everybody every single time out. especially when it's an untrustworthy fighter. If we're talking Valentina Shevchenko, we're talking Amanda Nunes, like, okay, 12-1, 15-1, like, it makes sense in that kind of a spot. But you're talking about a UFC debutante that's 4-1 lifetime in MMA. They do stupid shit. So they just can't be that kind of a number. Romanov, yeah, he's somewhere in the middle of the road between those two, man. I know he seems legit. I know it looks like he's taking things more seriously, but he's got a couple holes in his game too. So should he be 25-1? Like, I'm not convinced, but at the same time, I don't think I'm taking the poke on Sherman either. And we got a early dono here. Shout out to Stefan Dean Lugmer. Thank you very much, my friend. We appreciate the donation here at Pub Sports Radio. So we'll save a little bit of time here on this first one, man, because we just don't need to talk about it that much. We chatted all about it last week. Second fight of the evening, probably your real first fight of the evening, though, is Tatsuro Taira taking on Carlos Candelario. And this fight is one that I am extremely, extremely intrigued in. We've got a division that really is starting to fill itself out, some young up-and-coming prospects. It's really starting to get exciting times around here. And both these guys are making their UFC debut. You know, we've got this kid coming off of the Contender Series, and Carlos is a plus 210 underdog to the favorite Tatsuro, who's a minus 250 favorite here. Undefeated, this kid. I am very, very impressed so far from what I've seen from Tatsuro. The problem for me is he's coming from a different, overseas regional scene, and the track record isn't great over there. You can look like an all-star over there if you're bottom tier UFC and then get over here and struggle. I'm a little worried about this price tag he's coming over with. He's got 2 wins by decision, and only one of his finishes has come in the second round. Everything else is round 1. I mean, he just blows through these people so far. He's also got a 9-fight amateur career, does Tatsuro, so, I mean, that's something you can kind of fall back on. A little more experience than the 10-0 record would suggest. He is super light on his feet, Luke. He likes to attack that leg. I love the leg kicking attack from him, and he knows how to fight long. He mixes it up well when he gets in the tight clinch. He's got big knees. He's a sniper with that right hand. I love that right hand when he hits with it. And he's got a tight squeeze. He's another one of these guys that clubs and subs people, transitions super quickly to the back. As soon as he's on there, human backpack style, you're in trouble. Carlos Candelario, 8-1. He's 1-1 on the Contender Series, even though he's coming off a loss on the Contender Series. A lot of people thought he won that fight. Dana White apparently was impressed enough to go ahead and give him the opportunity here. He likes to keep his hands low, explodes in to close the range, and he's got great timing on his level changes, man, that double. He's got good active ground and pound when he gets on top of people, and he's got good hips, I noticed, but he does get elevated, reversed, and swept a couple times on those Dana White Contender Series fights, so it makes me a little bit cautious about the grappling chops of Candelario. This is a spot, man, that honestly, it kind of seems dog or pass to me, just because what we have seen coming from the Asian markets over to the UFC is they struggle with wrestlers. Once they get over here, it takes them a little while to get acclimated. They don't cut as much weight. They're not as physically strong or as big as some of the people in the UFC when they get here. It's a repeat story. We see it constantly. So I have a hard time getting behind Tatsuro as a minus 250 favorite in his UFC debut. But I don't know that I necessarily want to line up behind Candelario. I think Tatsuro's got a decent advantage on the feet. And like I mentioned, the opportunities to be swept and reversed on the mat gives me a little bit of pause with Candelario, even at this nice underdog price. What are you seeing here, Luke? What are you doing on this one?
I actually think Candelario is a pretty live dog this week, personally, just on the pretense that, I guess off the top, I think that this Taira guy kind of passes the eye test. He's shown some good things. He's obviously shown to be a decent wrestler, pretty good back taker. I believe he's a purple belt in jiu-jitsu, but he's shown pretty strong components in terms of when he gets to back positions. He'll throw ground and pound on the ground. My issue is that, kind of back to your original point of these guys coming over from that Japanese, even Chinese regional scene over there, over in Asia. The strength of competition over there is just piss poor, if I'm being completely candid. So yeah, the guy's got a great amateur record. He's got a great pro record, but he's beat absolutely nobody, and he's faced no resistance. striking or wrestling or grappling, he's pretty much just running everybody. And going back to his one fight more recently that went to decision against Shimizu, where he pretty much just stood on the outside, kind of pot shotted the guy over the course of 15 minutes. Once again, the guy he fought didn't really initiate wrestling sequences, didn't throw a ton of strikes. So it's like, as an analyst and as a gambler, it's hard for me to say how good somebody is when they have faced no adversity in either realm of their game, let alone now coming in to a UFC level and fighting a UFC caliber fighter. In my opinion, in Candelario, I actually bet Candelario against Altamirano on the Contender Series at like plus 200. I thought he won that fight personally, as did many other people. The concern for Candelario, you brought it up a bit, he can be taken down. He can get his back taken, but he is a brown belt in jiu-jitsu. He's been able to defend all of those positions. He's never been submitted as a pro. He's been able to either reverse or work out of those positions as well. He's shown to be a competent offensive wrestler. He actually comes from a Golden Gloves boxing background out on the East Coast. So he's shown some good things in his hands. And I do think some of his matchups do have some context too, even pre-UFC. He was coming off that 4-year-long layoff. So, didn't look great in that CES fight, but nonetheless did enough to get the job done. Comes in and fights Altamirano on the Contender Series, who's the former LFA champ. Came in there on, I think less than 10 days notice, and I thought made a decent account of himself. Like I said, slowed a little bit later, makes sense on 10 days notice, but in my opinion, he did enough to win that fight. So my thing is, I think this Candelario guy is going to give this guy more resistance in both realms than he's ever faced before. And he could go out there and handle it completely fine, right? He could look great in the striking. He could avoid shots, just kind of play that pot shot outside game. He could get Candelario down, take his back, submit him, control him for extensive minutes. Maybe he can, but my thing is, like, I don't know anything about the guy really outside of that, because I genuinely don't think he's going to be able to go out there and just run through a guy like Carlos Candelario. I think he's going to face exponentially more resistance in this fight than he's ever fought before. So plus 200 on that. I haven't made it yet because I do think we're probably going to see more money come in on Taira, and I'll be able to get a better price. But I think from a betting perspective, Candelario's, I don't want to say a must play because it depends on your style. But for me, I like to make these questions answered type of bets at big plus numbers all the time, because you just don't know. It's like, prove to me that you should be a 75% favorite in this fight against an actual fighter when you've been fighting pretty much nobody. And last point I'll make is, it wasn't overtly that long ago where we saw a gentleman by the name of Max Roshkov come in and fight Austin Hubbard, moderately chalky favorite, killing everybody on the regional scene, really strong wrestler, really strong grappler. The guy faced some resistance. He couldn't land his takedowns as easy. Those takedowns stopped coming. He got tired. He started getting punched in the face for the first time in his career, and the guy quits on the stool at the end of the second round. Not saying that's what's going to happen here. It's more so just an example of, all right, you got a guy coming in, everyone thinks is the bee's knees, but what happens when they actually face some resistance? You don't know. So plus 200 Candelario is the side, in my opinion.
I like it, man. I like it. And honestly, I have a very similar approach. You know that, where I like those prove it to me step up spots. And that's where, Luke, lately, those have just been failing. I get somebody and I'm like, hey, show me you can step up. And then they do. And they do it by like thunderous first round knockout. So I'm a little spooked going back to the well. And honestly, I'm just not that sharp on betting UFC debutants to begin with. So the fact that we've got not one but two, this is kind of like a Dana White Contender Series fight for me right now. So having a bit of a hard time, but I agree with you. I think it's dog or pass, and it looks like, just kind of market wide, man, it looks like that buyback is happening right now. Tatsuro got all the way up to minus 310. And now he's down to about minus 250. So it does look like the pushback has started to come on Candelario at this point. And I think you're right. And like I mentioned, I think the American wrestling is going to be something that this kid has never quite dealt with before. Maybe he can sweep, maybe he can submit, but I do think there's a half-decent shot that Candelario just grinds him like no one has been able to before, on the other side of the world over there.
We'll see.
I got to give a shout-out here real quick. I lost the comment here. 1 second. I will find it. I promise. Damn it, I hate when this happens. All right. I apologize. I can't find the comment. Here we go. Jay saying Risen has good fighters too. I don't know why they think all the JP guys are cans. Risen has good fighters. We didn't say shit about Risen. We're talking about the regional MMA scene over there. Those are absolutely two different levels of competition. Risen is, the Bellator, the UFC of that region. So yes, absolutely, Risen has good fighters. But the regional scene over there is a decent bit weaker than we see in other locations. That's all. It's a generality. And we're not saying it's necessarily fact, guys. We're not saying all regional scenes across the pond are worse than our regional scenes. It's just something that we kind of, over time, you've seen there's a couple of different examples where they flare out over in the UFC, or they're not as good, at least right off the bat, as they would expect, and it takes some time for them to acclimate to the UFC caliber competition. Some of them have to move stateside. We're seeing a lot of guys travel over to Fight Ready right now that used to train overseas, and they're starting to have success in their career because now they're training stateside with, higher level of competition, higher level training partners. Again, it's a generality. Maybe this kid is the exception to the rule and stands out. So, don't take it as we're insulting the entire region over there, please.
Real quick, Clint, there was another comment from Kung who said Shudo is a good organization. Shudo was a good organization in the early 2000s when yes. people couldn't, when the developing years of MMA was coming over. So I don't concede that, but in 2022, name me 10 guys in the next 2 minutes who have come out of Shudo and done anything good in the UFC in the last 10 years. I'll wait. That's all.
All right. Everybody going hard in the chat today. Apparently no one's allowed to have, semi opinions. We're ready to die on every hill already this Monday. Next fight up, Gina Mazany taking on Shanna Young in one of the most just weirdest fights on the board, man. I've seen a lot of really hot takes already this week about this fight here, Luke, and I do not feel confident on either side here. Gina Mazany is a -170 favorite. Shanna Young can be had for +150, and it was not too long ago that everyone was talking about how bad Gina Mazany is, how much of a bum Gina Mazany is, and now she's the lock of the week. And I'm personally having a hard time wrapping my brain around why people have flipped quite so hard on this one. And I think it has to do with the fact that everyone's so low on Shanna Young. Both women have 7 wins. Mazany has 5 losses. Young has 4 losses. Mazany's going to have a 3-inch reach advantage here. She's training out of Glory MMA, and she is just a physical monster, man. Go peep her Instagram. She is just absolutely jacked. Grinding wrestling style. She likes that body lock. She likes her trips. If she can get you on the floor, she's got good solid ground and pound. But really, she's a bully. She has got to be able to physically overpower her opponents, and that's the only answer. If she cannot overpower you, she's really not going to out-technique you anywhere. She's 2-5 in the UFC, and her wins over Ostovich and Wu, I mean, like 2 of the most bottom-tier wins you could possibly have. Those are her wins in the UFC. Now, I backed her against Ostovich. That was the home run spot because Ostovich is a model, not a fighter. You know what I mean? But outside of that, Gina Mazany is not a home run candidate, in my opinion. Shanna Young, she's dropping down to 125. Now, Gina used to fight up at 135 and made the drop to 125 herself. So the size should be comparable here, but Young definitely belongs down a weight class. She's not big enough and strong enough to be handling people up at 135, apparently. She does have fast hands. She's got a nice snappy head kick that I like, and she's actually pretty good in scrambles. The thing is, a lot of people are really beating Shanna Young up for her grappling chops so far in the UFC, and I get it. She's fought a relatively rough level of competition so far in the UFC, and they've all been able to take her down and control her. But prior to the UFC, she's got a decent wrestling background, and she showed some solid wrestling on the Dana White Contender Series until she slipped up, made one mistake in that 3rd round, and that was the end of it for her. I think she's better than we've seen if I'm being completely honest, Luke. I think this is a spot kind of like, and of course, I am just blanking on her name. My girl a couple weeks ago that everybody was talking shit about, and she pulled off the upset as a plus 185 underdog. Why can I not remember her name for the life of me all of a sudden? Anyway, you get my point. This is a spot where I think everybody's maybe a little bit too low on Shanna Young, and she kind of reminds everybody why she potentially could belong here. And the biggest thing for me is that Gina Mazany gasses out about a minute into the second round of every single fight. If she can't bully this girl for 15 straight minutes, then Shanna Young's going to have an opportunity to come back and win this fight. I'm not betting Gina Mazany. So it's another dog or pass spot for me. Luke, what about you?
Other side for me, I actually think it's a pretty good spot for Gina Mazany, to be honest. Historically, obviously, both girls have fought actually okay strength of competition. I think it's been much stronger against.
Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, good call. That's actually been probably a stronger component, I would say, for Mazany, because I don't think her losses are that bad. I mean, Sarah McMahon, Lena Landsberg just took a round off of homegirl Kianzad last week, Chason, Avila, and Cachoeira. I mean, she was winning the large majority of minutes in that fight, and then she just got nuked, essentially. And we know that Cachoeira, despite all of her issues, hits incredibly hard at the weight class to boot. My thing is that despite Young coming from a wrestling background, she is completely lost on bottom, in my opinion. And Gina Mazany is a girl who's reliable to shoot over 8 takedowns per 15 minutes. She's pretty strong from top positions. I just haven't seen anything to suggest that Shanna Young will give her any issues from bottom, really. I think Mazany's the better wrestler. I think she's a better grappler. She's got better ground and pound. And even on the feet, despite, Mazany's defensive issues, Shanna Young isn't necessarily the girl to push a crazy pace or a girl who hits particularly hard. At the weight class, I'd put her nowhere near in the category of power in terms of a Cachoeira and Young. So I don't think Mazany has to deal with as much issue there. Also, Young's kind of been a girl to play the outside at points too in certain fights. So I think there's aggression and power wrestling components. And when it comes to this lower level of WMMA, I love my aggression, I love my output, and I love my wrestling advantages, because that ultimately is what wins low-level WMMA at a very, very high clip too. So I honestly still kind of think the price is short on Mazany. I think she should be like a 66 to 70% favorite. I'm not saying load up on it because of the lower-level nature, but I think stylistically it's a pretty good fight for her.
Okay. And that's, you know what, man? That's exactly the type of opinion I've been seeing pretty much everywhere. And I'm not touching it. I don't know, man. This is one of those spots where I just tend to think that people are underestimating somebody who's had a couple of performances that are underneath her total bar. I think Shanna Young is better than we've been able to see. I do understand that what we've seen so far has been rough, and it plays right into the hands of Gina Mazany. But at the same time, I can see everybody just falling on their faces when Gina Mazany runs out of gas in the second round and having this fight flip on its head. So I'm not touching it.
Fair play.
Yeah, it's one of those spots I'm comfortable just saying, nope, not for me. No, thank you. Good luck to anybody and everybody betting that fight. I will have Uncle Wheezy called on you. The orderlies will be knocking on your door tomorrow. Next fight up, man. Mike Breeden taking on Natan Levy. And I love what's going on here in this fight, man. Another really solid matchup here. Prospects trying to get a couple of bounce backs, trying to see who is the legitimate, prospect moving forward for the UFC. Natan Levy is a minus 200 favorite. Breeden is plus 175. And Natan Levy is training at a Syndicate MMA. Everybody last time out heard the world about how he hasn't made it to the UFC level yet, but he just handles people in the gym. He's one of the hottest prospects they've got on the roster. Expect big things out. And then he got Hoffa. Hoffa Garcia just came out, absolutely mauled the kid, took him out of his element, showed him the ropes. shit happens. That's one of those, first step up type of positions that we like to snipe and bet on. And I did cash a ticket on Rafa Garcia that night, and then I was just stupid enough to go against him in his very next fight. Shouldn't have done my boy dirty that way, man. Natan Levy, he's got these big, powerful body kicks, man. He's got good, solid submission offense. He's got a pretty decent get-up game. I mean, he showed himself to be relatively well-rounded. You got to hope maybe he bounces back after that adjustment period, his first fight at the UFC level. Natan Levy will have a 1-inch reach advantage here, but he's taking on Mike, who's 10-4 overall, coming off of getting just vet lessoned to the next level in his first UFC fight. Round 1 blasted out by Hernandez. Now, the problem for me here, Luke, is that Hernandez does that to everybody. We've found out that Hernandez is a round 1 or bust fighter. He's not going to piece up anybody over the course of 15 minutes. He also is one of these guys that just demolishes you in round 1. And if you can survive round 1, he doesn't have much left in the tank. So I'm going to put just like a little tiny itty bitty grain of salt on that one for Breeden, because shit, we saw, some higher level caliber guys get KO'd by Hernandez early too. Breeden is training out of Glory MMA. He's one of these guys that wades forward. He's a brawler. He likes to go to work with his hands. He keeps those hands low and he kind of fires off from his hip, which makes him extremely hittable, and that is a bit of a concern. He flurries when his opponents are hurt. He's a BJJ brown belt training over there at Glory MMA. I like the gym. I like where he's at. And again, another guy that I just don't think got to show the best of himself. We know Glory MMA really likes their grappling heavy game plans. Natan Levy seems to be the -200 parlay piece lock of the week in this spot. And honestly, man, I'm just a little uncomfortable. I'm not quite sold here. I'm going to say Natan Levy bounces back. I'm going to say he got that adjustment period and he should be able to go ahead and get the win here in this spot. But I'm not quite ready to count out Mike Breeden. Another spot that I'm not running to the window to parlay Natan Levy in this spot, man. Do you have any action on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I guess off the top, I would not recommend parlaying Natan Levy.
Yeah.
I mean, once again, it's not the highest level of fight in the world to begin with. So just based on that principle, I'm not looking to parlay anybody at all. I do think he has potential wrestling advantages in this fight, physical advantages, despite coming from, a karate-based background. I'd say he's actually a better wrestler, grappler than he is a striker, because what I have seen from him on the feet, I don't overtly like going back to his regional days. He's not the highest output guy in the world. He kicks more than he punches, which tends not to be a great attribute in terms of winning general minutes, optics, all that stuff in MMA, unless you can play that game, elite like a Wonderboy Thompson. Obviously, we know that's fallen by the wayside a little bit in recent years, but overall, you know what I'm saying?
Prime Wonderboy, though.
Yeah, exactly. But I just don't think he manages distance like overtly that well. I mean, guys have been able to hit him clean on multiple occasions. He was actually on skates really bad. I think it was in his last LFA fight, and I think there's a sufficient argument that can be made that fight was actually a draw. He did show good recoverability though, and definitely showed some heart in that fight, which I'll give him credit for. And he was able to go out there and win. But the thing with Breeden is, I think he's kind of a meat and potatoes type of striker. I don't think he does anything overtly well, but he is aggressive. He'll chuck heat. And he'll throw his hands. I think 8 of his 10 pro wins come via strikes. As noted with Levy, despite being the karate guy, I don't think he really manages distance all that well. And he's not going to be a guy who's going to go out there and throw and land six significant strikes per minute. So I think Breeden can make this a scrappy fight when this fight is standing. The issue is probably with the ground, because I do think Levy is the better wrestler. I do think he's the better grappler. Do I think he submits a guy like Mike Breeden? Probably not, but I'm more so like wrestling based top control decision for Levy. Does that put him, over 70% in this fight? I don't necessarily think so. Am I willing to bet Breeden? I'm not really sure either, just because we haven't seen him aggressively wrestled a ton. Like I said, he is a competent defensive grappler though. So we'll see. I do actually think it's a dogger pass situation from the money line perspective personally, but it's a pretty big pass spot for me.
I'm right there with you, man. I'm right there with you. Like I said, I'm going to pick Levy. But I'm not going to bet Levy. And that tells you that I'm not confident in that -200 price tag being value. So Yeah, I see the paths to victory for Mike Breeden, and I also see that there's a chance, again, that he's just better than we've been able to see so far in the UFC. And I also think there's a chance that people are just overestimating Natan Levy. Like, he's done some stuff. Don't get me wrong. He's done some stuff. But so far, from what we've been able to see from his UFC run, is that he couldn't hack it. He got kind of handled by someone like Rafa Garcia. So we have big questions about both these guys. And in that circumstance, you're kind of throwing a bit of a blind dart. And I'm trying very hard not to do as much of that. So, yeah, I'll pick Natan Levy. I think Breeden can make this a scrap. And if it becomes a scrap, I'm not sure how it's going to play out, but it might be closer than people are expecting. Next fight up, folks, we're talking Yohan Lainesse taking on Gabe Green in the spot that I finally have taken some action on, and really frustrated, really frustrated, Luke, because there are some people out there who look way ahead at these UFC lines, and they just get these numbers that are gorgeous, and I'm jealous. We've got Gabe Green, who's 10-3, coming in here 1-1 in the UFC, taking on Yohan Lainesse, 8-0 undefeated Dana White Contender Series debutant. You'll probably remember Yohan. This dude has big power. I mean, he puts bad intentions on everything. He's got good solid blast doubles. He really loads up on that right hand, but he's got a bit of tall man defense, man. He leans back and he leaves that chin up. He's one of these take one to get one type of guys. He throws for the kill shot every single time, but he slows down. Like in every single fight that he does not end it early, he slows down and falls off a cliff. He's got a 3-inch reach advantage. And he's taking on Gabe Green, who, like I mentioned, 1-1 in the UFC. He's got that experience back pocket already. He went to war with Daniel Rodriguez in his UFC debut, man. I mean, just one of those spots where you would expect somebody coming in on their first fight to kind of fold over eventually against somebody that caliber, and he never did. And then he got a win over my guy Phil Rowe. I think very highly of Phil Rowe in the UFC, and he's just massive. So the fact that Gabe Green was able to survive some of those exchanges, the grappling exchanges that they were in, he had Phil Rowe wobbled in round 2, and then he almost TKO'd him with leg kicks. Like, he was hammering that leg so hard. If he had just stepped back and stood up Phil Rowe, he probably gets a TKO in that fight instead of a decision because he was hurting him that bad. This is my Dana White Contender Series spot for the night, Luke. I am betting against Yohan Lainesse. I don't believe in this kid. I think that 8-0 record is maybe a little bit fraudulent, and I think it's just going to take somebody like Gabe Green, who is tough, who is durable, who's got decent grappling and can scramble, to grind on that gas tank, survive that first round, and then come back and get the win. The problem, we talked about it at the top, Luke, the problem is when you are running bad and you're fading these round 1 fighters, these KO or bust guys, sometimes they get you. And that's just the run I've been on. So anybody listening, anybody in the chat, anybody in the comments section later on in the week, I don't want to hear jack shit if Yohan KOs this kid in the first round, because that's his win condition. That's the way Yohan wins fights. I'm fully aware of that. I am putting 2.3 units on Gabe Green. I think I got minus 115, and I'm looking to win 2 units. I just need Gabe Green to survive that first round, and then I think he takes over, and I don't think Lainesse is going to be able to keep up the pace with him, man. How about you?
I'm with you. I guess I was one of the early movers. I grabbed Green at minus 115 personally. I think he's up around minus 150 or so right now. I thought you broke down the fight pretty well, honestly, bro. I'm not impressed with this Lainesse guy really in any capacity. I actually had a pretty good sized bet on Justin Burlinson against him on the Contender Series, who I still think is actually probably one of the better fighters of the entire series. It just so happened he did not perform well and he got clipped, but skill for skill, I thought, you run that fight back 10 times between both those guys. Burlinson probably beats him 8 out of 10 times, if I'm being completely honest. So there's that. But yeah, dude, you brought up a lot of great points. I think he's obviously got big power, but I don't think he's overtly technical. It's very big winging shots. He doesn't set anything up. And one thing I noticed in watching through a lot of his tape in some of the fights that have been extended for him, he starts huffing and puffing a good bit right around the second round or so. And my guy, Gabe Green, once again, not an elite level striker by any means, definitely falls more into the meat and potatoes for me. But he's a decent kickboxer, and he's a guy who's going to go out there and push a decent pace. So I do think is reasonably tough to boot. I mean, the guy came in, made his debut on short notice, ate over 170 significant strikes from D-Rod, who's a fringe top 15 fighter, landed over 100 significant strikes of his own. So despite getting 30-27, I thought the dude made actually a pretty decent account of himself there. And then obviously to go out there and beat a guy like Phil Rowe, compromise him with leg kicks. We know Phil Rowe, solid brown belt in jiu-jitsu, dude, has crazy power in his hands to boot, solid athlete, put up a decent account of himself there, where I just don't think Lainesse has really shown anything. We just know that historically these regional front loader KO type guys just tend not to overtly translate in the UFC. So if he does not KO Gabe Green early, we're going to see. I mean, we have seen some issues from Green on the mat. He has been taken down. He will give his back, but I haven't seen enough from Lainesse to say that that's an overt issue, because Green's also still pretty solid in the scrambles at the same time too, and actually a decent offensive wrestler. I think he could probably just bank minutes on top of Lainesse too. So in general, my take is that I just think Green has more tools to win the fight. He's got better cardio. He's got better output. He's proven to be a solid defensive grappler to not get submitted. So Pick'em really made not a lot of sense to me, and I think it's a good buy low spot on Gabe Green.
All right, man. I'm glad we agree on that one, because it is the first and one of two bets that I've actually moved on so far for this card. It was the one that jumped out at me immediately. And, if Yohan is just that guy that keeps proving me wrong, it'll take me 2 or 3 times of trying to fade him before I finally come around, because I'm just not buying it, man. I'm just not buying it. I don't
watch it, Clint. He'll be the guy. He's going to sit there and front load KOs for the next 5 fights, and we're all just burning money.
He'll be my new Vicente Luque, man. He'll be the guy that just round 1 KOs everybody for 4 or 5 in a row, and then finally I go, all right, I'm not losing any more money fading this guy, and then he'll get grinded on for 15 minutes, exactly like we thought would happen. Man, that's just the way the game goes sometimes. But yeah, I don't. I think Eric Betts Fight said it best a minute ago, is that I can't imagine Lainesse is long for the UFC. I just don't think he's got the skills, man. He can hit super hard, and he's going to have a certain level of success being able to bully people and hit harder than some people. But at the UFC level, I just think people with the skill advantage and someone who's a bit tough and durable is going to be able to get around that, and then he'll get exposed. I fully expect that to be the case in this spot. I don't think he's a home run Dana White Contender Series winner. I think he's a fade Dana White Contender Series winner. Just me personally. All right, everybody, we got 159 live viewers. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me here on Pub Sports Radio. We're joined by my guy Luke, Sparring with Reality, betting from the Club and Sub podcast. Real quick, we got to hear a word from one of our sponsors. Get out there, make sure you protect those balls. What's going on, sports gamblers? I don't need to tell you that sometimes when you're betting on sports, making a good bet takes giant balls. But every once in a while, there's a downside to having giant cojones. That's right. Anytime you're exercising, anytime you're working out, sometimes it gets a little uncomfortable. There's some extra chafing. One of them decides to stick to your leg, and that can be a problem. Sometimes you need a day off after a tough run on the treadmill because your legs are raw from rubbing together because of your gigantic
balls.
Well, let me tell you, Stageman Underwear has you covered. Stageman Underwear was designed with your giant
Golden Globes
specifically in mind. This patented design comes with a special pouch exactly for your dangler and balloons, so that they do not chafe while you're on the treadmill, so they do not get too moist on a hot and humid desert day. I promise you, as somebody who has personally tested these exact Stageman underwear, that once you put these things on and you have a go on the workout, you wrestle on the mat if you're into jiu-jitsu, you will never go back to another pair of regular underwear ever. The difference made by Stageman, the comfort level that I enjoyed, is something nothing short of magical.
Ball security is important in football and basketball. Why should it be any different for you? Take care of that treasure trunk and that care package and give it the respect it deserves.
When you check out, use promo code PUB for a 10% discount and give your balls the best pair of underwear, the most level of comfort they have ever enjoyed. All right, welcome back, everybody. We're talking UFC Vegas 53, and we got a donation in here from a stubborn Mick saying, don't use this to make a bum bet. Thank you very much, Mick. Donations here in the chat go to Pub Sports Radio, and it helps us keep the lights on, so don't worry. No gambling with the tips and donations coming in here in the chat. We end up using those to keep the lights on and bringing the show to everybody for free. So thank you so much for the support. Evan, I got to be right there with you, man. Ian, at the end of that thing, he absolutely nailed it. So that was a very fun commercial to make. Everybody go buy Stage Man underwear. I'm not even kidding. I'm serious about that. Next fight up, man, we got Daniel da Silva taking on Francisco Figueiredo. And I've got to make fun of this guy every single time the UFC rosters him, Luke. This Figueiredo is only in the UFC because of his last name. He is Discount Figueiredo. My favorite one was when I said that, you know, when you go to the store with your mom and you try to buy like a name brand cereal and she's like, no, we got Lucky Charms at home, but it's like the shitty bag where the marshmallows are all melted together. This is the Figueiredo that mom has at home for you to save money. Like that's what this guy is. He doesn't have the striking skill of his brother. He doesn't have the grappling skill of his brother. He doesn't have the explosive power of his brother. I mean, he's got decent striking. He's physically strong, but he's slow, man. He is plodding. He plays with his hands low. He's hittable. He just lost to Malcolm Gordon. Luke, if there was, I said in that breakdown, I went, the UFC is trying to throw the Figueiredo brothers a bone by getting Little Figgy a knockout. They picked the chinniest man on the roster, and he gets grinded for 15 minutes. Like, you can't come back from that. This has got to be his last opportunity in the UFC. His opponent, Daniel da Silva, 11-2. He dropped his UFC debut to my guy, Jefe, Jeff Molina. No shame in that. I am super high on Jeff Molina, so no problems with him losing that fight. And he's got a nasty kicking offense, this guy. He's got slick back takes, I've noticed. He's very aggressive when he's on his back, so if you manage to take him down, he's one of these guys that might be able to steal around if you're not doing anything from top position. It's hard to find tape on Daniel da Silva. I had a hard time finding a whole lot of footage of him, so I'm working off of very little here, but I still think he's probably good enough to beat Figueiredo. Right now, he is minus 125 over Francisco Figueiredo, who's a plus 105 underdog. And this is that spot, Luke, that I'm just staring at it, and I'm like, why am I not loading up? Like, I feel like I already should have bet Daniel da Silva or Daniel Lacerda, whatever he goes by. But why is it a pick 'em? Like, we all know how bad Figueiredo is at this point. Shouldn't he just steamroll here? What's your take on this fight, man?
Yeah, I'd say it's probably the most difficult fight on the card to cap just because we have so little data on da Silva, but even on Fig, we still don't have a ton. We only have a couple UFC fights and I think like maybe one regional or so. So in terms of assessing, you know, whose skill set is better here and there, it's a little difficult. In my opinion, the one thing I've noticed for Fig, I agree with pretty much everything you said in regards to him. My biggest issue with him more than anything is that his pacing is so inconsistent. You know, at this lower level of weight class, I mean, you got to chuck your hands, bro. You know, at these lower levels, you got to let your hands fly a little bit. And this guy, his pacing in regards to Fig is just so inconsistent. He also does not hit hard. Or I should say doesn't hit as hard as his obviously big brother in Figs. In, you know, homeboy in Silva gets dropped by Jeff Molina. You touched on that, but I would take Jeff Molina every single day of the week over little shitty Fig at the same time too. The wrestling and the grappling is interesting because we've seen both look bad on bottom. The one thing I will say in regards to Fig, getting out wrestled by Malcolm Gordon is a horrible look, in my opinion, despite Gordon being a black belt. He's a bottom player. If you go back and watch, if we're
he's a jiu-jitsu guy, not a wrestler.
If we're really extrapolating here, you see what, Malcolm Gordon's primary success in his career has been, guard subs. That's how he's winning his fights. He's not going out there and, wrestle effing dudes. That's just not historically the case. And there just wasn't really much of a sense of urgency for Fig to stand up in that scenario. But given the limited amount of footage on Silva, I've seen him hit a couple takedowns here and there, but more fake news.
Dude, I'm sorry to interrupt. For anybody listening to like the audio version of this, and they're just like getting the audio breakdowns and keep hearing me like giggle and interrupt Luke, the chat is just going off with these glorious names for Figueiredo. I mean, we got the Salvation Army of Figueiredo, more Fig Newton than Figueiredo. I mean, like, I can't help myself. I'm sorry, Luke. I don't mean to interrupt, man. Go ahead.
No, dude. I mean, I'm kind of just rambling at this point because it's a fight that's hard to break down because I just don't have enough data on Silva. As much as I say I don't like the pacing of Figueiredo, I haven't seen, Silva in really any extended fights at all. So I don't know definitively what his pacing like is extended either. What I will say, he does appear to be a fast, explosive guy. You touched on his kicking game. He seems to be a competent grappler as well, but didn't look very good on bottom in the capacity he was there against Molina. So I guess you could really sell me on either guy having wrestling success here. The only reason I'm probably more inclined to pick Silva is just because Fig doesn't do anything, and I guess I have seen more aggressive components from Silva, who appears to be the better athlete as well. So that's my pick, but I can't bet the fight in good conscience just because I have less than 15 minutes of footage on Silva.
I'm right there with you, Luke. I am right there with you. And I'm just, at this point, like anybody listening to the show knows, I'm like desperate for a win. I want to get like a winning event in the books. And I want so badly to bet the Silva, but I'm just like stay the course. Stay the course. Got to make a good bet. This is such a dart throw because we have 2 minutes of footage on this guy. He should beat Figueiredo, but damn, I'm not going to be shocked if Francisco Figueiredo comes in here and does something surprising and is able to expose a hole that we didn't know this guy had because we never had any tape of it in the first place. So I'm not touching it. I'm going to go ahead and say De Silva should win this thing. Daniel Laredo De Silva, whatever. I've seen his name posted different places at different times. So I'm going to go ahead and just completely pass on this one, but I'll side with the slight favorite, the ever so slight favorite. Next fight up, we got GM3 taking on Krzysztof Jotko. And boy, are the hairs on the back of my neck standing up for this one, Luke. Oh my goodness. We have got Gerald Meerschaert, the people's favorite, round 3 king himself, plus 150 as an underdog. Krzysztof Jotko is a minus 170 favorite. And right off the hop, I just want to get this right out of the way. I did not check like the openers for this fight. I saw Gerald Meerschaert had opened up as like a plus 120, a plus 125 dog-ish at like the stateside legal books. And now he's been smoked all the way up to a plus 150 underdog. But if you look at like the opener, like I know it's probably a soft opener. Somebody got a $50 bet down or something like that and moved the line. But the books actually opened up Gerald Meerschaert, I think, as a minus 125 favorite. So it's just been massive steam on Jotko flipping this line. And I'm so suspicious of this one, Luke. I am so suspicious because Gerald Meerschaert, he's got nice boxing. He does. He's got decent hands, but he's got some chin concerns. He's super hittable. And even though he's been the submission king, even though he's been the round 3 king, like, he really relies on picking these guys off that have bad cardio. He really relies on taking over these fights as they go on. He kind of does the Homer Simpson strategy where he gets beat up a little bit and then takes over. We've seen him hurt. We've seen him wobbled. We've seen him knocked out clean like Hamzat got him. He does not stop that overhand right. If you've got a half-decent overhand right on you, you're going to connect and you're going to hurt him. But he just finds a way to win. He's an absolute dog. So if there's an underdog that you can put your money on, Gerald Meerschaert is always one that's going to fight for your money. Krzysztof Jotko on the flip side, though, is 23-5. And my reaction to Krzysztof Jotko every time he fights is, meh. Like, he's so mid everywhere. Like, he doesn't strike particularly well, but he does it well enough. He doesn't grapple particularly well, but he does it well enough. Like, the one thing that he really stands out with, Luke, is his takedown defense. He's got an 83% takedown defense. He's big. He's strong. He is hard to get to the ground. So you've got to be able to, like, stick and move and outwork this guy on the feet. He's very hard to look good against, and he just knows how to win. I've been trying to fade Krzysztof Jotko because he's quote-unquote not that good for a while now, and he just keeps on doing enough to get it done. I think this is a trap, Luke. Like, getting plus money on Gerald Meerschaert after 3 finishes in a row, especially his last win when he absolutely ran through. I'm sorry, not his last win. That was the Dustin Stoltzfus one, but the one before that where he ran through Mahmoud Muradov. Like, how do you come off of 3 fights in a row like that are all finishes, and then the bookies are hanging plus money on him? Like, I've got a feeling that this is that spot where everybody and their mom is going to be backing Gerald Meerschaert here, expecting him to do his thing. And then Jotko just has the boringest, grindingest fight and has a 15-minute victory and somehow manages to not only look like he covers the minus 170, but should have been a bigger favorite. Like, that's just like tinfoil hat speaking right there. Like, that's kind of what I expect to happen in this spot. What about you, Luke? Tell me, am I crazy?
Man, it's another really weird matchup. I'd say it's out of the entire card, it's probably one of the more weird matchups is the best way I can classify it. You touched on, Jotko, elite takedown defense, even pre Serkinov fight. His takedown defense was actually at 87%.
Don't remind me about the Serkinov fight.
I did take a shot on Serkinov.
I took a big shot on Serkinov. Man, that hurt.
Yeah, that didn't go over too well. But no, I think you broke down the fight pretty well. The thing with Jotko is he's not easy to look good against, but he doesn't look great himself when he wins. He's a technical point fighter with good takedown defense who can occasionally wrestle. That's kind of what his game is. He doesn't have an overt sub game. He's not a big power threat. He's just one of those guys who wins reasonably competitive fights at a pretty high clip. And that's kind of what I think here as well, because Meerschaert, in my opinion, isn't a great pure wrestler by any means. I still think of him more as a jiu-jitsu bottom player based guy. He's definitely had a lot of wrestling success in his career, but I do think that Homeboy Jotko is probably one of the best takedown defense based guys he has fought to date, at least. So I think in general of Gerald, getting the initial shots are going to be incredibly difficult. I more so see it as Gerald shooting, Jotko stuffing. Gerald pulls guard. Does Jotko go down with him or not? That kind of brings it into wave 2 of the fight, because I actually do think Jotko's defensive grappling is probably good enough to be fine on top of Gerald, but that's still a very dangerous game to play with Gerald, because he's proved that wrong, more often than not. I mean, even if you go back to the Stoltzfus fight, Stoltzfus was going to win that fight, but he decided to try to take GM3's back in a transition, lost the position, was tired, and gets subbed as a result. But make no mistake about it, Stoltzfus would have won that fight actually via wrestling, barring that little mistake at the end of that fight. Don't get that twisted. Stoltzfus would have won that fight.
And I bet Stoltzfus, Luke, like, if we're just the train that I'm on right now, like going through GM3's wins, those comeback victories, he got me on almost every single one of them. I was big on Stoltzfus that night, and I was doing cartwheels having that number in my pocket. I think he was in the ballpark of like plus 200. People called me insane for taking that shot, and then he blows it in the 3rd round. Oh,
yeah, that's right. He's a weird guy to fight, and he's a weird guy to bet against, and he's a weird guy how do you cap his fights, right? Because he doesn't do anything overtly well outside of his crafty sub game. Once again, he's one of those guys you just can't make small mistakes against, or he will get you in something. But going back to the feet real quick, I don't think Gerald is completely screwed because of how slow pace that Jotko plays. Like if Gerald can just go out there, chuck heat, I do think his striking actually has improved, even though I don't think it's great. If he can make this like a gritty, grindy, clinch-based battle or whatever, I think he can close the gap on the feet there too. So I mean, I kind of think Gerald's the side, but once again, I have not a strong confidence that he lands takedowns. Now I'm trying to cap how the grappling plays should Jotko be on top. Now I'm trying to cap what confidence interval I have in Meerschaert forcing that gritty type of fight. Because one thing I will say, this is one thing I will feel confident in saying about this fight. If Meerschaert decides to have a range kickboxing match with Jotko, he loses that fight at a very high clip. In my opinion. But I do think Gerald Meerschaert, he's a crafty guy. He could squeak something. I could see him potentially snagging something. He could force a close fight on the feet, make it a gritty clinch battle where it goes to split. I wouldn't be shocked. Put it this way. I'm not laying chalk on Chris Jotko in this fight. Like I don't give a shit. Am I trying to back GM3 either? I mean, probably not. Honestly, I think the play for the fight, avoid the sides, go anti-violence, go with the over right around evens. I think that's actually a good play. I think the kind of finish GM3 narrative stops here. Once again, I'm not downplaying his grappling ability. He could definitely sub him. He could. If he gets into those positions, I think he can sub a large majority of the division. But I do think Jotko has the defensive wrestling and grappling to potentially nullify that. He also isn't the prototypical power threat that, a Chimaev or any sort of explosive big shots necessarily that gives me pause to say that he potentially gets knocked out here by Jotko, once again, who's a low volume point fighter. So I actually think anti-violence is the way to go in this fight and go with the over.
I don't mind that, man. I do want to go back, and the one thing that I've kind of sniped on Gerald Meerschaert is that weakness to defend the right hand. And I know that this is a southpaw versus southpaw matchup, so that's something that needs to be stated, because I guess southpaws have kind of a weird thing where they're kind of used to being orthodox versus southpaw because there just aren't that many southpaws. So when you get southpaw versus southpaw, it ends up being weird for them too, because they're not used to fighting other southpaws. So like if I can find any notice on tape of Jotko landing a couple of big right hands, I might take a taste of the Jotko KO, just because that's the one punch that GM3 just doesn't see coming. Like every single fight, you go back and every punch that hurts him is a big right hand. Hits the right cross straight down or straight over the top of his jab. So if I can, get a reason to bet Jotko by KO, I probably will sprinkle it, or it'll be in one of my, degenerate parlays that I like to do. But yeah, I'm going to pick Jotko here, man. As weird as that is to say, I should love this guy, Luke. He's got a tattoo of my favorite Dragon Ball Z character on his shoulder. Like, I should be just all in Nerd Brothers with Krzysztof Jotko. He trains out of ATT. He just finds ways to win. Like, why do I not like Krzysztof Jotko? I have every reason to like the man, and for some reason, I always look to be on the other side of him. So I think I need to just probably – it's favorite or pass for me, man. It's favorite or pass. I'm going to go ahead and shout out Steve Baldwin here. We got another donation. Thank you so much. Never give up on the fight until you win the belt. That comes from Israel Moore Avior. I think I'm probably saying that wrong. Bounce back starts this week. I completely agree, Stephen. Thank you very much for the donation, my friend. I do appreciate it. All of us here at Pub Sports Radio absolutely do appreciate it. All right, moving on up. We are moving through this card at a nice pace here. Darren the Damage Elkins taking on Tristan Connelly in another fight where I am just seeing opinions fly on Twitter, man. This is going to be a big one. This might be the Twitter main event for this card. People are loving them some Darren the Damage Elkins. And we have got a good, solid, stable opening line here. Tristan Connelly is a plus 140 underdog. Darren Elkins is a minus 160 favorite. Darren Elkins is 26-10. Tristan Connelly is 14-7. The Damage says it all, man. We know what this guy does. He is the MMA Homer Simpson. He takes all the punishment that you've got to offer, and then he turns the tables on you and breaks you as soon as you slow down. His gas tank is a weapon, but he is coming off getting absolutely blasted by Cub Swanson. I did take the stab on Darren Elkins against Cub Swanson. I kind of was doing the one last ride with my guy thing. The durability is cracking, Luke. Like, when you have that game plan, when that's your whole style is to take the punishment and then have a comeback win, like, you don't last forever. You just can't keep that up over the course of a career, and it's really starting to show. Now, I know Cub had like an all-star, all-time performance that night. Came in dialed in, was sharp as we have ever seen him, but he hit Darren with some big shots, and it was a merciful stoppage when he got clipped and was wobbling all over the octagon. I just don't think it's going to take much anymore for Darren Elkins to get stopped. He looks bad when he gets hurt these days. He will have a 3-inch reach advantage. He's a king scrambling, man. But what I've noticed recently is that his wrestling chops, he seems almost like a jiu-jitsu scrambler these days. He's not so much a power forward wrestler type where he's blast doubling you and pinning you up against the fence. Like, he kind of uses his wrestling in reverse and then gets taken down and then kind of like rolls for the legs, reverses you, sweeps you. He's been doing a lot of that lately that I'm almost wondering if that's the offensive wrestling is something maybe we need to kind of downgrade a little bit for Darren Elkins' skill set, because we just haven't seen it be as sharp recently. His opponent, Tristan Connelly, this guy knows how to fight long. He likes to stay in your face. I mean, he cuts off the cage and plants right in front of you, always pumping his jab. He's constantly touching you, and then he loads up on these big overhand rights. He's got strong wrestling himself. He's a BJJ black belt, and this is the guy that spoiled Michel Pereira's UFC debut. This is the guy who single-handedly made me believe that Michel Pereira was a bum that didn't deserve to be in the UFC, and that's cost me a couple of times since. But he got absolutely smothered by Pat Sabatini his last fight out. Had nothing for him. It's his second fight down at 145. You know, usually he fought at 155. He cut down against Pat, had a rough night out, and he got dropped by Pat in that fight. He got caught with one big, clean right hand, and it just put him down. And that was a bit of a concern for me, that maybe at 145, the cut is possibly a little too much for Tristan Connelly. We need maybe a little bit more evidence to support that, because getting grinded on by Pat Sabatini is not necessarily something that we should judge you too harshly for. I mean, it's what the guy does. But at the end of the day, I don't think that Darren Elkins' wrestling is on the level of a Pat Sabatini. I think his durability is waning. And I don't think the referees are going to let him get away with the Homer Simpson approach anymore, the way he's stumbling all over the cage when he gets clipped these days. Honestly, Luke, I'm kind of against MMA Twitter right now. I know all the love is coming in on Darren Elkins. That line is getting smoked. He opened up minus 135. He's as high as minus 170 out there around the market. And I think I'm going to fade everybody here, Luke. I think I'm going to sit tight and stand my ground, and when the time comes, pull the trigger on Tristan Connelly. But because I think he's the fresher guy, I think that Darren Elkins is kind of a volume-based striker these days. He doesn't have like the one-hitter quitter. So even if Tristan Connelly isn't quite as durable as I'd like him to be at 145, he's not the kind of guy that I think Elkins is just going to sit down with like a single punch. Unless he's just completely shot, of course, which is totally on the table. But at the end of the day, I think the right hand of Tristan Connelly can cause a lot of problems for Darren Elkins, and he is not a gas bag like some of these last couple opponents were for Elkins. Like, let me just run through the last few opponents that Elkins has, gotten the win over. Michael Johnson, the man who's known for pulling the biggest stunts in MMA history. Like, when he's got it in the bag, he finds a way to lose it. That was all the way back in 2018. Now, he went through hell on wheels there for that 4-fight run, Volkanovski, Lainesse, Hall, and then Nate Landwehr, where he probably arguably won the fight against Nate Landwehr. But then he got a win over Eduardo Garagorri, who, another guy probably doesn't belong in the UFC, but it was a round 3 submission win. And then Derek Minner, another first round or bust guy that I backed the dump truck up, Luke. We knew Derek Minner was going to get completely flipped on as soon as he got out of round 1. And sure enough, Elkins brought the game plan home against a guy like. I think
we all backed the dump truck on Elkins in that one. I think everybody bet Elkins in that one.
It was so crazy, man. I saw some people out there that really believed in Minner, and I was just scratching my head. I'm like, I thought I was missing something. I was like, this is the most obvious spot of all time. The dude's gonna gas, and we got Homer Simpson. So yeah, I don't know. That was a sweet spot, though. I loved that spot. But man, as much as I've rode to the bank with Elkins a couple times, I think this is the spot to flip the script and fade him. He's fighting somebody who's got good, submissions, good wrestling, good gas. And I think that's kind of the kryptonite for Darren Elkins at this point. I think if nothing else, that Tristan Connelly is going to give him a hell of a fight. Even if he doesn't get the finish, he won't be the guy fading in the third round. He'll be the guy that's still in his face in the third round. You know what I mean?
I guess a bit on the other side. I haven't bet the fight, but I kind of think it's an Elkins or pass. Spawn, as horrible as as that sounds. Obviously, you brought up all the main points, man. I mean, the guy's 37 now. Just got starched in his last outing. If you listen to interviews, the dude's slurring his words. I'm sorry. Like, I love Darren Elkins. He's provided a ton of entertainment over the years, but I think we may see a very sad story for Darren Elkins within the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, it's
unfortunately
bad.
I agree.
If you listen to his interviews, the guy can barely even speak. So, but getting back to the fight, I don't think Tristan Connelly's overtly powerful, but at this stage in time, it might not matter. I legitimately think Elkins could be at the point where he could just get dropped by a jab. It wasn't that long ago where he did get dropped twice by Ryan Hall at the same time, who we know is a bottom player guard jiu-jitsu guy. So that's not a great look either. But stylistically, Darren Elkins is like 75% in this fight. I think he shouldn't really have much issue with Tristan Connelly, to be completely honest. I think he's the better wrestler. He's the better grappler. He has the better cardio. He's consistent to throw his hands. I'm not even convinced that Tristan Connelly is UFC caliber. So for me, it comes down to how shot is Darren Elkins, because if he's not completely done, if he has anything left in the tank, he really should not have much issue. These are the type of steps down for him at this point in his career that he should win a lot. But we've seen this time and time again of guys who have been around forever, who are legends, who have great records, who have beaten a ton of great guys. They get to these, late 30s, early 40s type points in their career, and they start losing fights to guys they shouldn't be losing to in any stretch of the imagination at all. So that's kind of where I'm at. I think it's an Elkins, spot or pass. I'm going to sit off it, though, because honestly, I'm terrified. I think the guy might be completely cooked at this point, and that's all it takes. But stylistically, I don't think he should have a problem in this fight.
Okay. Fair enough, man. Fair enough. I just think I think Connelly's better than people are kind of giving credit for. His run up to getting into the UFC was pretty solid. And then the Michel Pereira fight, like, even though it was a bit of a fluke and Pereira gassed out, like, that's still, impressive that he was able to do that kind of cardio, that kind of pace. I think that's kind of what you need right now to beat Darren Elkins. I think that as long as he doesn't gas himself out completely, that's kind of what Elkins, does and is able to take advantage of. If he can hit Elkins once or twice with a couple big shots and then hold his own in the grappling exchanges, which I think he can, I just think that's what it takes to go ahead and get the win there. So I think this line's starting to get a little bit wide. I love Elkins. The damage is my boy. I absolutely – it crushes my heart, man. I think you're right that he's going to go full BJ Penn on us at some point. Like, I just don't think he's going to be – he's taking too much damage, man. Someone in his family needs to talk to him and quick. But unfortunately, we're probably going to get a couple of more highlight KOs before we see the end of the road. And I got a bad feeling one of them might be taking place on Saturday. All right. Real quickly here, everybody. We got to run one more ad, and then we'll leave you alone until the end of the show. All right, everybody. Welcome back into the Die Hard MMA podcast. I'm your boy Clint, joined by Luke. We're talking UFC Vegas 53. smash that like button for me. Do all the things. Subscribe. I have to say it. I know. I'll shut up. Let's talk about the next fight on the docket here. We've got Jared Gordon, the Flash himself, taking on Grant Dawson in a fight that y'all already know where I'm going because Jared Gordon is on my fade list. I am trying desperately to get on the other side of this, man. I don't believe in his chin, and especially up at this weight class, lightweight 155. I think he's one of these middle of the road guys. I think he's one of these too small for 155, but too big for 145 type of guys. Just finds himself right smack in the middle. And I'm going to catch him. I think this is the week I'm going to get it done, Luke. So what we got is Grant Dawson. He is coming in here after finally making the move over to ATT. He's been training at Glory MMA and Fitness and kind of talked about how he's a big fish in a small pond. You know, he didn't have the bodies to work with. He was kind of their feather in the cap talent besides my guy, Jeff Molina. And I mean, David Onama is showing up and stuff like that now. But he really was their claim to fame over there as far as having a blue chip prospect. So he moves off over to ATT. Now he's working with some serious talent over there. And you really got to expect the improvements. He's a guy that just wrestles. And in the Flash's last fight, we saw him get taken down 4 times by somebody who I think Grant Dawson is better at wrestling than. So I think the wrestling is going to be available for Grant Dawson, but I do need to give Jared Gordon the credit where it's due. He's got decent counter wrestling. He's good in scrambles. His gas tank, he's another one of these gas tank guys where if he can tire you out, he will just wear on you over the course of the fight, use that wrestling in reverse, grind you down, and then he'll make these fights close. He'll get these decision wins, and against guys that don't belong on his level, he'll get late finishes. And I know that's a little bit terrifying because Grant Dawson's last fight, we saw him completely gas out in that 3rd round and be near helpless at the end of the fight. But he hung in there. He absolutely dug deep, stayed in the fight, got the draw, and that was kind of the eye-opening experience for him that he needed to go elsewhere where he could get better training partners and, level up, to say it, the nicest way possible. I'm backing him here, man. I got minus 153 units on Grant Dawson to win 2. And honestly, I think this is that turning the corner spot. Like, I think he's going to show some new wrinkles. I think he's going to show some new levels. And if he can just bully somebody like Gordon up against the cage, he doesn't necessarily need to exhaust himself trying to get him to the mat. He can just kind of out-physical him, pin him up against the fence, and work on him. I also think we've got an outside shot at seeing the chin issues return for Jared Gordon in this spot. Grant Dawson isn't necessarily the biggest hitter, but he's a big, physical, strong guy. Doesn't have a ton of knockouts on his record, but we've seen Gordon wobble enough times. I think he's got the shot of like ground and pound TKOing him if he hits him with one of those big clubs that he's got. So I'm on the favorite here, man. I'm drinking the juice, as as our guy John would say, and I'm on the favorite on this one. What about you, Luke? What are you doing here?
I'm on the fence in terms of playing Dawson or not. I'm kind of seeing where the line's going to shake out. If I do it, I probably should do it shortly because I do actually think he probably continues to take more money. I've always been a Grant Dawson fan, but the problem I've had with him at the same time is I still don't think his striking is really any good, to be completely honest. I do think it's something that he's developed, and I think it's something that he's improved a bit, but he's still incredibly hittable at the same time. And I actually do think Jared Gordon, despite being knocked out in his 3 UFC losses, I do think Jared Gordon's the better boxer in this fight, and I do think his metrics actually also check that out in pretty much every single category as well, whereas Dawson's kind of your traditional grinder, who has to go out there and wrestle, lay and pray, find his submissions. That's how he gets it done. But we've seen some of those components from Jared Gordon as well. Gordon's shown to be a competent, decent offensive wrestler. He's a brown belt under Danaher as well. The problem I have with Gordon is he only stuffs takedowns at 50%, and he has a really poor tendency to give his back and get controlled in those positions. And to your point, in fighting a guy in Joe Selecki in his last outing, I actually backed Gordon at plus money there, was able to squeak out a W in that scenario. But I do think Grant Dawson actually is a better pure wrestler than Joe Selecki. I think Joe Selecki is a better grappler than Grant Dawson, but I think Grant Dawson is going to have wrestling advantages in this fight, so I don't know how much the striking overtly matters. Once again, I don't think like, Jared Gordon washes him on the feet or anything like that. I'm not saying that, but I do favor him on the feet. It's just one of those spots. I don't know how long this fight is going to take place at space. And I do think Dawson has physical advantages. He has those wrestling advantages. I mean, I think he's in control positions for 80% of the time his fights are spent in the grappling, which is about 50% of his fights. So it's just, the guy's just this crazy, ground control specialist. A lot of people will look at, his last fight with Glenn, where obviously the third round fell off, a bit of a cliff. There was the 10-8 there. But if you really go back and look at the large body for Dawson, his gas tank has largely proven to be fine. So I kind of attribute that to just being an anomaly, and Rick Glenn being, a scrappy dude at the end of the day. I don't necessarily know if that's going to be the case for Jared Gordon, especially if he's going to be getting control and potentially putting a body triangle early on in this fight. So once again, I'm not there yet. I might play Dawson. I haven't decided yet. It's probably going to be a smaller play for me because I actually do give a little bit more credence to Mr. Gordon than you do personally, Clint, because I actually think he's somewhat of an underrated fighter, but I do think it's a Dawson or pass spot.
And I'm with you, man. Like I said, I got to give the credit where it's due to Gordon. I have sold him short. There's a couple fighters that I've walked it back and apologized because there's a couple guys that I've just straight up read wrong that I've expected to be complete fades and fan out and guys that'll get taken advantage of. And they've proven me wrong. And Jared Gordon is one of those. But what I've also seen is guys that I've sworn that I'm going to stop betting against, like Vicente Luque. I get the perfect spot against Bilal Muhammad to finally go against him. And because I'm scared to lose any more money betting against him, I hop off. And that's what I feel like here, man. I got to stick to my guns. I think that he has the exact advantages that I'm looking for to take advantage of the holes that I've been talking about Gordon having this whole time. And I think I've just been that guy that's been overexcited to fade a fighter with a bad fighter. I mean, that's where, shout out Dogger Pass Podcast, Cody Safdie talks about this a lot, where he's like, I got this guy marked as a fade, and I'm just so excited to go against him to take advantage of the holes that I see, that I'll jump on a bad fighter and expect them to be able to take advantage of it. And I think that's what I've been doing. I think that's what I've been doing. I'm analyzing these holes, and I'm thinking just anybody will be able to do it, and that's not the case. This is a spot where we've got a bigger, stronger guy, a legitimate 155er, full power. Like you mentioned, that last fight, I really think that was a fluke. And I got to wonder, the betting market massively underestimated Rick Glenn in that fight. I got to wonder if maybe Dawson didn't do that too, man. It seemed like everyone, Dawson included, was just expecting him to run through this guy coming off a long layoff. And Glenn is a scrappy dude. And he just hung in there way more than any of us expected. So
I played Dawson at plus money by decision there. That's sucked really bad.
Yeah, if you could have just gotten out of that round without the 10-8.
Clearly, right?
Yeah, that was a good bet, man. But honestly, and this is where I'm seeing a couple people this week. A lot of people are saying Dawson by decision is the way to go. Like I said, with the size advantage and the chin issues of Jared Gordon, don't be shocked if he gets the TKO or the KO here in this particular fight. I think the price tag, before it gets out of hand, now is where you just lay the money line. This is one of those spots where you just play straight up money line. Don't get too fancy, because there's a chance that this thing flies the other direction. And poor Josh Benedict here in the chat had Rick Glenn at plus 310. Shit, dude. Like, yeah, you almost got it with that one. Sorry to hear you missed out on that spot. But
I think a comment from Dirty Reg 22. He says Dawson out of glory will have James Krause shouting instructions might just make the difference. Dawson is now down at American Top Team, bro. So this will be his first fight at American Top Team. So no more James Krause for Mr. Dawson.
Hey, and I like James Krause, but ATT has good coaches as well. And ATT has, better bodies, just, on average, better bodies. So I think he's going to get higher level training caliber, training partners. And I think that's going to go a long way for a kid his age. So hopefully it's a good fit. Hopefully we see him turn those corners. And I think they can do a lot for his striking. I know you mentioned earlier, Luke, that he's a liability striking. And I kind of tend to agree that I do think that Gordon's kind of the better overall boxer. But I think HET will have him evolving, and I think they'll have him evolving quickly. He's that kind of a kid. Let's hope I'm right. Next fight up, Andre Fili taking on Joanderson Brito. And I just need to take a second, Luke. I just got to take a second. I feel so badly for Andre Fili. His last fight, oh boy, did we see peak Andre Fili. There have been a lot of us, myself included, we've talked about Andre Fili fighting at the level of his competition, taking it slow sometimes on guys that he's better than, having slow starts, taking time to wake up in the fight. And his last fight out, he came out like a bat out of hell. And he made it extremely clear that Daniel Pineda was not on his level. That's probably the best single performance we've ever seen from Andre Fili, at least the best round we've ever seen from Andre Fili. He had the man absolutely destroyed. And then right at the beginning of the second round, eye poke, no contest, fight gets called. To Pineda's credit, we've seen a lot of people trying to take the easy way out and get these disqualifications with the eye pokes recently. A very successful one just this weekend. Pineda lied to the official. Like, his eye is completely swollen shut. The official covers his other eye, and Pineda goes, "Yeah, I can see you." Like, you're covering his eye, and we can all see blatantly that his eye is massively swollen shut. And he's like, "No, I can see you." He wanted to continue. So props to Daniel Pineda for being a warrior, man. But what we've got is just a huge favorite here in this spot. And I think after that last performance, kind of deservedly so. Andre Fili minus 260, plus 220 to come back on Joanderson Brito. Brito is another very exciting prospect, one of these, balls of muscle out here. Very physically fit, big blast doubles, powerful, really strong, good body lock. He is dangerous when he gets on top of people. He definitely has a solid top game, and that strength and power advantage is something that he puts to use. He takes people's backs really solid. It was a successful Dana White Contender Series fade spot for me, though. They threw him against Bill Aljo in his first UFC fight. We were able to snipe that spot and cash a ticket there. I like the crazy aggression of Joanderson Brito. But Andre Fili is such a slick customer, man. The way he flows on the feet when he's feeling it, he's got a 2-inch reach advantage here in this spot. The concern for me is the 68% takedown defense. It's not bad. It's not bad. But we have seen him taken down and abused there on the ground a couple of times. I kind of feel like this line may be a little wide, but at the same time, if Andre Fili shows up for this fight the way he showed up to his last one, if we get another level jump out of Andre Fili, if we get serious, ears pinned back, ready to bull rush Andre Fili, I also think there is some upside that he just smokes his way straight through Joanderson Brito. Have you made a move on this one, Luke?
I actually did today. I bet Brito for a unit at plus 230. I've been a huge fan of Fili over the years. Obviously, the guy's been essentially kind of the gatekeeper in a lot of way. Fringe top 15, fringe top 20 guy. He's fought a ton of great competition over the years, which, is going to definitely give some credence to his underwhelming 9-7 UFC record. I get that 100%. But the problem I have with him is that he still tends to just fight close on the feet, despite being a very big featherweight, a guy with a 74-inch reach. Doesn't really use it effectively. I think he defends strikes at like 52%. And the thing with Brito is, despite me thinking that Fili is the better technical kickboxer in the matchup, Brito's a guy who's going to come forward and throw heat at the end of the day. And we've seen guys be able to lock Fili down, pretty consistently over the years. He's just not a guy who's shown who he can fight from the outside technically over the course of 15 minutes. He's just really never been able to do that against anybody. So it's one of those spots where I get kind of warped in my handicapping analysis, type mindset. We're like, okay, I think this guy's technically better, but it's like, okay, well, if he's getting walked down, getting hit with big power shots is him, eating a straight, here and there, and it's relatively 50-50, maybe edge Fili based on technical acumen. Are the judges really going to see it that way? I don't know. This Brito dude can crack, man. there ain't no hesitation in what this dude's game's going to be. He's going to come forward and throw. I mean, I went back and watched the Algio fight. Yes, he lost the Algio fight, but I remember that fight relatively differently. You know, he gave Algio a much better scrap and contest than I thought. Once again, it's his UFC debut against another battle-tested guy as well. And then when it comes to the grappling, it's interesting because despite Fili being a really strong wrestler, we saw him get swept in the first round against Sadiq Youssef, stuck there. We saw him get stuck on his back in the second against Sadiq as well. We saw him get washed on the mat by Bryce Mitchell as well. So despite his relatively decent takedown defense number, it's not as if we haven't seen Fili stuck on bottom before. He's a guy who will play guard, and you know he will accept that, and he will try to sit there and throw out submissions, where we have seen Brito look pretty strong from top positions. You know, he did take the first round from Bill Algio in his last outing. He's taken the first round, multiple rounds in other of his regional fights, and has done really well from top position as well. The concern I have is more so with Brito on bottom in the back half of that Algio fight, where he looked pretty tired and did not look great on bottom, where we do know Fili is a pretty good wrestler. He is pretty strong from top position as well. So bringing all that into the soup, I think you have to favor Fili in the fight, but I can't get to like 75% on Fili when any time he's fought in any extended fight, it's pretty much been close or competitive. Outside of, you know, when he's either got finished or he's finished a couple other dudes, it's usually pretty competitive based fights. My thing with Brito is, once again, he may not be the better technical fighter here. He's going to be a guy that's going to fight for my money, for better or for worse. He's going to come out here. He's going to sling hands. He's going to attempt takedowns. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu as well, who has back-taking competency. We've seen Fili get stuck in body triangles before. So at plus 230 against a guy who I think can give Fili an honest scrap, despite I'm picking Fili to win because I do think that veteranship ultimately comes through. But at plus 230, that's a big number against a guy who I think, I should say on a guy who I think can force a close fight.
Okay. I completely agree with you on a lot of points that you made, man. And I'm kind of in the same boat where I'm picking Fili, but as much as I think there is that upside that he just kind of finesses this guy and shows him the ropes in the octagon, I recognize the fact that you can just be a bull in there sometimes. You know, having that power and that strength advantage, especially with his wrestling ability, sometimes that can be all it takes to just neutralize a better fighter. So I totally get people taking the underdog shot. I don't think I'm going to find myself parlaying Andre Fili, but I am picking him to win. I wouldn't be surprised if this fight plays out close, but I do think that, again, if Fili comes correct, he could look like an easy, parlay piece in hindsight. But I recognize the danger of Joanderson Brito. And honestly, man, this fight, it almost says something about the UFC's belief in Brito. Because if you fight closely with someone like Bill Algio, and then they're not giving you another Dana White Contender Series debutant, where like you're 0-1 in the UFC, let's see if you're legit. Let's pair you up with another guy that's making his first step into the cage. No. They're giving you Fili, like a guy that's been around
great against Pineda too, right?
Who looked great against Pineda. And the UFC thinks, I think that's a good matchup. Like that, I just think that says something about where the matchmakers and the people that know what they're doing actually think about Brito. So I've got a feeling this fight is going to be a lot closer than people are expecting it to be. I recognize that there's a chance Fili just handles him, but again, I'm a little nervous. I am picking Fili to win. I don't think I'm betting him here. All right, here we go. We are closing down, folks. Co-main event of the evening, Jake Collier taking on Andre Arlovsky, the future heavyweight GOAT, taking on one of the greatest heavyweights of all time. That's right. We've got the man himself, Jake Collier, taking everybody by storm. 13-6. Andre Arlovsky, 33-20. I mean, Andre Arlovsky, honestly, Luke, I'm not convinced that Andre Arlovsky isn't just Father Time himself. Like we always say, Father Time is undefeated. Father Time is the one that catches us all. He's just disguising himself. He's like Zeus coming down looking like a mortal man to bang some lady and have a demigod. That's Andre Arlovsky. He is father time, and he's just fighting for funsies because this guy never gets old, and he keeps doing it. This is another guy who I have attempted to take advantage of. Took Jared Vanderaa extremely confidently in that spot. Fight came down to round 2. It was extremely close. I thought Vanderaa did enough. Andre Arlovski gets the split decision win on me. And here we are. I'm talking about another Andre Arlovski fight, and I've got a young buck who's got high output that I think can maybe get one over on the old man. I just don't know that I've got it in me to go back to the well, man. Andre Arlovski is a minus 145 favorite. Jake Collier is plus 125. And honestly, Luke, that right there tells me everything I need to know about this fight, because right before we jumped on the show, I'm seeing nothing but Jake Collier love. Everybody's on Collier this week. Everybody thinks the dog money on Collier. Easy spot. He's got the pace. He'll be able to outwork him. That line just moved. Collier was a plus 105, a plus 115 underdog. Now he's plus 125 since the beginning of the show started. So even though everybody that we know is backing the dog, the line's moving the other way. Those reverse line movement spots, I think, just speak volumes in MMA betting, especially in these close shots. Man, I'm not sure what to think of Jake Collier. I'm really not, because the wins he's got since his return, relatively low level. Dude's kind of scraping by. He's a natural middleweight. He's fighting up at heavyweight. He's got the pace, but he starts to slow down. 100-plus significant strikes is not something that's out of the ordinary for this guy. But you go back and you watch, the last couple of his fights, and especially against Fili, he was out of gas, man. In that third round, after throwing all those strikes, he was really starting to slow down. And Andre Arlovski has this uncanny ability to just control that space. Like, you try to come in on this guy, and he's just not there to be hit. His risk-adverse style over the last couple of years has been something that's incredibly frustrating, because you think people should just be able to walk forward and hit him, and they can't for some reason. So I'm not convinced that simply having high output from Jake Collier is going to be enough to get it done, man. I kind of leaned with everybody else. I kind of feel like Jake Collier is a live dog, but at the same time, my gut just tells me, once again, I'm wrong. And Andre Arlovski's going to have his hand raised at the end of the night. What about you?
It's another really weird fight on this card, bro.
It's another weird one.
I think you can make substantial arguments either way as to why both are value, and I think you can make a really substantial argument as to why you should stay everything away from this fight from a money line perspective, and I'm more so on the latter of that. Honestly, I've been a big fan of both guys in recent years. I've made a good chunk of change on Arlovski being an undervalued fighter in recent years. I've made some money on Collier being an undervalued fighter in recent years as well. To me, what the fight comes down to is that you do have the output of Collier, who I think, despite his frame, is a bit deceptive. I actually think the guy's a decent athlete. Once again, the guy used to fight at 185, 205, despite him put, on maybe not the best of weight. He still moves pretty well at heavyweight. He's still fast. He still throws leg kicks. His output is consistent. Defensively, he's not very good. And that's kind of where I think the difference in the fight is that Arlovski in recent years has been able to just adapt his style to that more outside point fighting based style. I think he can suppress volume much better. He kind of rolls with shots much better. But he's also shown that he can fight in higher output affairs in these, kind of later 40 recent years of his run as well. The long running joke on Arlovski was this guy's got no chin. This guy's got no chin. It's like, well, the guy hasn't been knocked out in like 14 fights or something. It's been a second since homeboy Arlovski's been knocked out. And I don't think Collier is the biggest power threat in the world either. So I think it probably comes down to what panel of judges you potentially have. This fight has the makings of the greasy, close, split heavyweight fight. So to your point, I've seen a lot of people, throw big bets on Collier this week. It's like, homeboys fought some higher output guys.
My exact response.
He fought Felipe, who's a very high output heavyweight. He's not very good, but he's a high output heavyweight. He fought Bozer, who kicks pretty well, who's a much more technically better fighter, in my opinion, than Jake Collier is. Arlovski beat fucking him. Arlovsky's a mythical creature at 43 years old. I'm telling you guys
It's
right
incredible.
now. People look at the 43 and say, "Oh, he's 43." We saw the same thing. Even Olynyk the other week, right? Olynyk 44 or whatever. He can't win a fight. The guy goes out there.
I can't believe I didn't ride on Olynyk, Luke. I talked about it all week, and you know how many times I talked myself into like a Friday ad where it's terrible, like Jordan Wright this past week. Like I talk myself into those spots constantly, and I've been saying last ride with Olynyk, last ride with Olynyk. And then I didn't bet that one. I'm so mad at myself.
But ultimately, my point is, like, I just don't know where any supreme confidence comes, from either side here. I mean, you can make the argument the Collier's plus money. It's a close fight, therefore you should bet him. But it's like, how much are you extracting out of that at like plus 110, plus 115? Like, are you getting really much of an edge? What I'm honestly considering is just laying the juice on the over 2.5 at like minus 200. This just has the makings of a range kickboxing match between two largely durable heavyweights who don't wrestle. That's going to go over like 75% of the time. So I think minus 200 on the over. Throw out the close decision, wonky optics, judges, variance of that close fight. Just take the over at minus 200 is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I don't mind that at all. And man, I think the chat nailed it. You just got to look at Andrei Arlovsky by split decision because it seems like that's just what he freaking does these days. Like he doesn't ever go for the KO because by the third round he's comfortable just cashing his paycheck. You know what I mean? Like he just completely avoids the fight, sticks and moves, and works his way around his opponent. He knows exactly what he needs to do to just get the nod at the end of the day. It's very frustrating, but that split decision prop is one that's rapidly becoming one of my favorites. That one snuck up on me. Sorry, audio listeners there. One thing, Luke, I got to ask you, though. Well, I don't know what to make of Collier and his parading at heavyweight. Like, on one hand, I love the speed. I love the athleticism that he brings because he's usually a guy that probably should be fighting lower or lighter, and now he's up at heavyweight instead. But on the other hand, someone like Andrei Arlovsky, he's a career heavyweight, dude. Like, he's been up here his whole life. This guy couldn't get down to 185. You know what I mean? Like, at a certain point, you think it's got to tip, right? Like, at a certain point, don't we think that maybe Collier's just not the guy at heavyweight? Like, it's working against the bottom tier. It's working against the guys barely hanging on to UFC job, but do we really think he can get by guys the caliber of like Andrei Arlovsky consistently?
So I guess is the question you're posing, do I think he could knock out?
No, I just mean longevity at heavyweight. Like, I feel like it's almost smoke and mirrors that Jake Collier has been a heavyweight for the last couple fights. I feel like he's fighting just kind of bottom tier dudes, and he's not long for the division. Like I almost feel like I know he's having some success, and if he wants to just be kind of a mid-tier fighter at this weight class, then go for it. But I mean, choking out Chase Sherman, meh. Winning a decision over Gian Vellante, meh. Split decision loss to Carlos Felipe, who's been cut from the organization, meh. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I just don't know if he's enough to beat the guys the caliber of Andrei Arlovsky, these real heavyweights, physical heavyweights, guys that couldn't get down to 205 or 185 if their life depended on it type of guys.
I guess I disagree. I think he's a guy who has a skill set who can. I don't think he's elite. I don't think he's going to be a top 15 guy. I mean, don't mistake me for that, but I do think he has a skill set to hang around in the heavyweight division and be a lower to mid-tier heavyweight for the next, I don't know how old he is now, but probably the next 5 or so years, to be honest. I think it just comes with who he's matched against stylistically. Once again, we haven't seen him face, a ton of takedowns. Once again, heavyweight's not exactly the most wrestle grapple heavy division, but as touched on, I think the guy does have speed advantages at this weight class because he probably should be fighting at a lower weight class. Maybe he's going to get bonked by some of these bigger hitters at heavyweight in general. I can see that 100%, but he has the makings of a mid-tier 50-50 guy who's going to be around in the UFC for quite a few years. That's just my take.
Okay. Fair enough, man. Fair enough. That'll work for me. I want to see more Jake Collier anyway. He's fun. So I'm fine if he hangs around and is a 500 fighter in the UFC for a couple of years.
I could be categorically wrong. That's just my opinion.
All right, folks, it is main event time. The real star of the show here, the one fight on this card that just stands out like a sore thumb, Rob Font taking on Marlon Chito Vera. This is a real fight, folks. Like this fight I am excited for. So Rob Font is a guy who worked his way up to the top. He was on one hell of a win streak, drops a fight to the legend Jose Aldo, another guy that just keeps getting me in the short shorts every time I try. Wins over Ricky Simone, Cody Garbrandt, Marlon Moraes. I mean, put together a real nice resume for himself on his way up to that shot there. And he's just got the flow state boxing, man. This guy is a solid technical striker, knows how to use his reach, fights long, high pace, accurate hands. I mean, his last two fights, he put up 149 and 176 significant strikes. I mean, holy hell. But the thing that got him in the Jose Aldo fight were those power shots. Like, it was completely obvious that even though he was, like, touching Jose Aldo, it was night and day when Jose Aldo hit him back. Jose Aldo won that fight via sheer force. He's got a 55% takedown defense, does Rob Font. So a little bit of an issue with the wrestling side of things, the grappling side of things. Marlon Vera, a guy, as most of you know, people who've been listening to the show for a while, I've been bouncing back and forth on. At first when he got to the UFC, he was underrated, and I just piled up behind him. I was the biggest fan of Marlon Vera. I'm a super hipster on Marlon Chito Vera. I can claim to be one of the first guys in the boat, and then I jumped ship. And I don't know why, and I started trying to fade him, and he has just been making improvements ever since. And, I think I said this last time. I think it's time for me to get back in the boat, man. This guy is improving. He's getting better. He's made of iron. You cannot stop Marlon Chito Vera. And now he's got the experience. He's 29 years old, 20-7. Like, he's finally amassed that type of, the cage, the ring time, fought some super high-level opponents. His last opponent, Frankie Edgar, he fought Jose Aldo a couple fights back. Like, I'm expecting big things from a guy like Chito Vera, and I do think we'll see him in the top 5. I do think we'll see him challenging for a title at some point. He's got nasty leg kicks, raw power, and he's one of these Diaz Bros types, man. He just gets better the deeper the fight goes. He kind of chips away at you, and the Davy Grant fight is the one that really stood out to me because I'm a Davy Grant guy, and I thought Davy Grant was going to be the first one to finally be able to clip and put down Marlon Vera in that spot. I felt like that line was just way too wide, and holy shit, they had to call the ambulance for my guy Davy Grant at the end of that fight. The elbows that Vera got him with, that diced him open, left him in a bloody mess. Like, just, it couldn't have impressed me anymore. I think this is a fight where we really get to see the potential of Marlon Vera because he was built for 5 rounds. The way he fights, he loses some of these decisions where it starts like looking like he's going to take over and he's going to be the man, but he just runs out of time because it's a 3-round fight. Now he's finally got the opportunity to add those championship rounds and see what he looks like in round 4, see what he looks like in round 5. I kind of think that dog price tag on Marlon Vera here is the way to go. I mean, I expect Rob Font to have success early, like everybody does against Chito Vera, but I think eventually Chito's going to have some success cutting off the cage. I think Chito's going to have success walking him down. And I do also think, very much like the Jose Aldo fight, that Chito just hits different. I think there's a chance that once he starts connecting with Rob Font, he kind of takes over and wins those exchanges, even if, it's 1 versus 3 as far as who's landing. I think we've seen that Rob Font doesn't handle those power strikes very well. And I think the chopping leg kicks can be something. I think he can bully him up against the cage and just kind of out physically muscle him. We've seen kind of a lack of grappling from Chito Vera recently. It's not something he goes to a lot because he really enjoys striking with his opponents these days. I think if he goes back to the wrestling and the jiu-jitsu, he can just maul someone like Rob Font in this fight, man. I think there's a lot of ways that Chito wins. And Mushroom nailed it. I think it's time to bring back the sprinkles, the round 3, 4, and 5, because I think that late finish, even if he's behind, is absolutely something on the table. So it's Chito for me, man. What about you?
Other side, I'm very
Woo!
close to betting Rob Font, to be completely honest. I've never been the biggest Cheeto truther, but one thing I will say is my opinion on Vera has changed pretty significantly over the years. I've been low on him pretty much throughout his entire run. He's obviously proven me wrong, but the one thing I will say for him in relation to Font's an incredibly underrated boxer. The guy is elite at the division, in my opinion. You start slow, obviously, with Cheeto. It is 5. I get it. So you definitely have like the build merit there. But in terms of if we're looking at how guys are beating Rob Font, all right, we're talking about Jose Aldo. If we're about to compare the boxing of Jose Aldo to Marlon Vera, I'm sorry, I mean we can't have a conversation there. I mean Jose Aldo is just a much better striker than Marlon Vera. Assunção clipped him at a couple points. Pedro Munoz clipped him, early, but in general, Rob Font is outboxing people strike for strike, minute for minute for the overwhelming majority of his fights. Cheeto Vera's defense really has not improved much at all. So I think it's more so reliant on Cheeto having to effectively pressure and work his kicks. I think if he can work a kicking based game, that can give Font some issues. But if he's going to sit there and try to box, I shouldn't say try to box because he obviously mixes in the kicks overall, but I'm saying boxing based. I mean, it's pretty one-way traffic on Font for me. I think he fucks Vera up in that capacity just because Vera's defense hasn't improved in there. And Vera just hasn't shown the general power components in terms of his hands against a guy like Font and the guys that Font has fought. That gives me some, overt issues. Honestly, the more credence I give to Vera in this fight as to why he could potentially be value is the grappling, because Font doesn't exactly stuff takedowns at the greatest clip. Cheeto
I think that's the key, really.
Yeah, Cheeto is the better grappler of the two. He's a crafty guy. But Cheeto can be wrestled too. And we have seen Font mix it in here and there. I don't think it's a primary part of his game. Nonetheless, I do think the ground favors Cheeto, but I there's just this high narrative that Cheeto just kicks his ass in 3, 4, and 5. I'm highly skeptical about that, to be honest. I think people highly underrate the boxing of Rob Font personally. So actually, I think it's at this price where it's gotten betting down to now. I understand if you were on the Cheeto narrative early and you got in on him, around that plus 140, and that's your side, great. But at this price, at a slight lean to Vera, I mean, I think you can get him as low as on Font at minus 130 on some books. I'm probably going to be playing Rob Font. If not, I'm actually probably looking to overs because I don't think Cheeto finishes him, and I don't necessarily think Rob finishes him either, because Cheeto's obviously incredibly durable. Once again, I don't think Cheeto has the power necessary to finish Font. The concern there is more so in the grappling of could he sub Font. So it's Font or overs for me.
Okay. Honestly, man, I don't mind the overs. That's something that I haven't looked at just yet. But you know me. I love turning the tail of the tape on its head and saying, hey, people think this is going to be a violent finish. Let's go the other direction. Looks like the over 4.5 opener is minus 160. So the books are already a little bit, sneaky, ready for it. We're not going to get
that high.
Yeah. That's what I'm showing, at least for the opener.
Oh, wow. Oh, it got hit. Okay.
Yeah. So they know.
All right. Well, maybe not. At that price, I'd be more inclined to bet Font then, to be honest.
Yeah. No, I hear you there for sure. Honestly, though, the over isn't a half bad look. I do think that the late finish is potentially on the table, especially if, this is the hardest part with betting, is that I can script a game plan for a fighter, and if they don't stick to it, my bet looks like ass in hindsight. So if Cheeto goes out there and attacks the legs of Rob Font and then bullies him against the fence and takes him down, I do think he can finish him. I think he can slow him down and then get him on the mat. And once he's on the mat, work the elbows and maybe open up a sub like that. That's perfect to script here for me. But if he doesn't do exactly that, yeah, we probably get a greasy split decision. We probably get Rob Font being the better boxer and sticking and moving. It could be a completely different thing. And that's something I think people, especially, fans of the sport or bettors that don't do the podcasting thing, sometimes tend to overlook, is that, we try to run these fights through our head 10, 20, 50, 100 times and think what's the best outcome. Do the numbers make sense? And a lot of people only look at the one event and think, well, that's how it happens right there. Like it's one time, that's how it went. That's how it's always going to go. And that's just not quite how it works. I do think Cheeto for me is probably the side. I missed the boat a little bit on that number. Like you mentioned, people getting in there at plus 140 and stuff obviously would be a much, much better spot. I like Cheeto personally. I'm not sure how bullish I'm going to be betting him because I do have a bad track record when I flip on my fighters. As soon as I finally decide to get behind them, that's when they drop one. So I'm a little bit shell-shocked looking to back Cheeto in this spot, but I might end up stabbing. I do like the underdog here in the main event, so we're head-to-head here in this spot. Luke, any closing thoughts, man? Appreciate you coming on the show. I think we had a couple spots that we agreed on, a couple spots we disagreed on. Another dumpster divey, low-level fun event for us to break down here. I think we found a couple of decent spots, though. Any closing thoughts? Let the people know where they can find you. The floor is yours, my man.
Yeah, guys. I mean, absolutely fun card. Like I said, I mean, it's not the greatest from a name value perspective, but a ton of fun fights nonetheless. Love coming on, chopping it up with you, Clint. Just goes to show that you can disagree. You can be on two sides of a fight. You don't got to be a dick. You don't got to be mean. You guys can sit there and go back and forth with people and be cordial about it too. But yeah, you guys can follow me on Twitter, SWR_betting. You can see that right here. Patreon.com/SWR betting. I put out bets, content, all that fun stuff there. Club and Sub podcast Wednesday night. Me and my boys breaking down these fights from a betting perspective. Actually, on Tuesday nights on Pub Sports Radio as well. Me and my boys Wheezy, Brady, and Monk breaking the card down from a DFS perspective as well. So lots of stuff every week. Appreciate you having me on, bro. It's always fun talking to you.
Absolutely, man. Always appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you very much for giving us your time and your thoughts. They are invaluable. I love me some Club and Sub boys. Everybody, seriously, make sure you go support them. They are gems of our community, so hang out with them, show them some love for sure. Appreciate you coming on again, man. Hopefully we can get on track together and start the comeback tour for the two of us here. 2022 going to end up being our bitch by the end of it instead of the other way around. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. As always, check out Pub Sports Radio. Make sure you subscribe here if you haven't already. Hit the like button on your way out the door and buy some damn Stage Men underwear. Seriously, give them a shot. Promo code PUB. I promise you guys, you're not going to regret it. Put them on, and it's like your balls are in a hammock. It's glorious. Thank you, everybody. You have a wonderful week. Keep your head up. Make sure you tuck your chin. Don't let life rear naked choke you. You got this. We're going to kick some ass. We'll see you later in the week. See you next week, every single Monday, right here, no matter what. Die Hard MMA podcast for life. Have a good one.